David, you are an academic as well. I mean, you were also academic, and now you're now lecturing. You lecture. So tell us more about education today.
Um, well, I mean, I've held academic positions. I was a part-time lecturer at Middlesex University this semester in whistleblower dismissal law and supervising dissertations. I've been a dean of law faculty at the college for many years. I lectured in the Honourable Society of King's Inns for many years and held other sundry academic positions. So, teaching law subjects. Um, so I have quite a lot of experience of the education industry, the legal education industry, certainly. And that career, it's not really a career, this kind of add-on for the last 2 years where people seem to be interested in my views on lots of issues. And so you've got all this journalism coming out, has made me look at things in certain different ways. The first thing I think that's important to stress is I draw a very crisp distinction between degrees in education. We are producing endless amounts of people with degrees of technical skills. Lawyers are terrible about this, but they don't have any nuance, subtlety, erudition, critical understanding of the subject that they're dealing with. They're purely technocrats jumping over the hurdles because the education system, because of over-competition and a deregulation and massive amounts of degrees coming out, is requiring people to be over-specialised. And you meet these memory merchants or people who are rote learners and they're not educated. I mean, I believe in education in the sense of Goethe's idea of the civilized education to educated gentlemen. Now, people might say that's sexist. Well, let's call it educated gentlemen and women. And education should be a humanist, broad brush education. And that means you are not an educated person if you do not have a historical sense, some element of a philosophical sense, some interest in the arts, some interest, I think, in fundamental questions of life and death, and morality and ethics. And all of that's going, or has gone. In Ireland, they've removed history as a compulsory subject for the leaving certificate, which is the equivalent of the A-levels. This is berserk stuff. If you forget the past, the truism, the tritism, you're condemned to repeating it. Or Milan Kundera, the absence of a historical intelligence is the first step towards tyranny. And we're producing, through these text generation, gobbledygook, short-term, attentive lawyers, a kind of new generation of Anthony Burgess's Clockwork Orange types, proficient technical language. I have nothing against precision. But precision also sometimes requires complexity. I mean, you don't have to be over-elaborate to be eloquent. You think of the great public communicators, such as George Orwell in print form, or Christopher Hitchens, both in print form and or Ernest Hemingway in print form. They write crisply and exactly. I think Jeffrey Robertson Kesey does this as well. But it is accessible. But it is not dumbing things down. And we're not producing very many educated people. And it's very worrying that over-specialization and corporatization, and it's true of the discipline of law, is producing people who are getting into positions of extreme institutional authority and decision-making based on proliferation of degrees without the nuanced judgment or ability to make proper decisions. And also the validation of things too cheaply and too quickly. So, for example, a 3-week course entitles an idiot social worker or an idiot guard to make an assessment of expertise and be accepted in a courtroom when they shouldn't be there in the first place, to take an example of an expertise that doesn't exist. And a degree awarded to somebody absent the academic community are problematic here as well, because if you become an academic without field experience, well, then you're not really in a position to to say anything of consequence whatsoever, unless your subject is, Roman history or medieval history or something that doesn't. But even then, you probably should visit the sites. If you're talking about Roman history, perhaps you should go to the sites. But if you're talking about being a lawyer, pontificating about your subject without ever having practiced it, then you're a fraud. Truthfully. And that's also the case. And that conditions my view about, in terms of philosophy, I have about judging and how to do things. Of law, or the legal realism, which I'm very interested about being educated in Harvard. Law in action. Oliver Wendell Holmes. The prophecies of what the courts do are, in fact, what I mean by the law and nothing else. All well and good to talk about law, but in the kangaroo courts, or criminal courts, or family courts, I'm not saying they're kangaroo as an overlying process, but fact, semi-fact, invention, distortion, all of those things condition outcomes more so. And therefore, I think you always have to match clinical against theoretical experience if you are to be an adequately functioning professional. But I also think that no matter what you are, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, an academic, you've got to be interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary. Everything affects everything else. It doesn't mean that you go into a courtroom, as I occasionally want to do, and start quoting Shakespeare. In this day and age, sometimes that might make you a laughing stock. But it does mean you have Shakespeare to be able to quote occasionally if it proves apt to do so. It does mean that a judge should realise that the adherence to a black letter law has to be modulated against what's the the just outcome or the principled outcome or what's called the legal realists call the judicial hunch. And these are signs and hallmarks of educated people. And you notice in Britain in particular of the older generation of judges. They are educated. In fact, in general, many of the English judges are properly educated, which is not necessarily true of the Irish judges. And they have perspective and nuance and balance and a greater degree of core of things. And they take what they do seriously and they put it in all degree of context. But as we get more and more specialised, we're getting people who, in a legal process, are robots. This is what the law says. This is not legal, but this is not. And that's not a good thing. So we are entering a new dark age of non-education. And there are reasons for that. People are not reading books. I'm shamelessly part of the Gutenberg Galaxy. I read it, I suppose, about 10 or 12 books a week at least, probably more. I've been reading quite a lot in the last couple of years because of the restraints and demands of having to produce things for columns. So an idea triggers off and you read something else around it. I wouldn't say I'm completist and I have a day job, but I think it's important to understand that the more you know, the less you know. And also I think education creates a sense of humility. Christopher Hitchens famously said, the first sign of intelligent life in someone is, I don't know. Too many people in this kind of Americanization, I'm the best, I'm really confident. Couldn't you just say, I haven't got the foggiest? I don't know. Now, people are afraid of saying that for fear they will be regarded as stupid. It is not stupidity to say you don't know. It is, in fact, the sign of intelligence. My late friend Adrian Hardiman would say, I don't know now. I will know it in an hour's time. And that's also an important way of looking at things and to be constantly developing. But we're breeding a generation of people who are in fixed views, closed minds, caught in what the Innocence Project and other people call cognitive bias, a mindset. You see it particularly in social workers and police officers. But you also see it in lawyering castes and small communities. They think of certain things in a fixed way and they can't think outside of that paradigm box. They are therefore not educated. And the radical conclusion, therefore, is they shouldn't be in any position of decision-making authority if that's the way they think. They shouldn't be allowed to be there. But they are, because the state wants robots. because robots do the state's bidding. We are only obeying orders. And it's very, very, very dangerous because the first sign of the critical educated person is to ask questions, to be skeptical, not to accept things at face value. Once you unconditionally obey authority, and we're entering a very dangerously compliant, brave new world, then you do awful things. It's like the Eichmann defense in Israel. The Israelis brought him up for trial in Hannah Arendt's book. I was only obeying orders, which is the Nazi thing. Well, it's very, very dangerous. I was only putting people on trains. That's a complete blurred moral intelligence. And you apply that, and I horrify people saying, well, I was only doing my job working for Goldman Sachs. But that's not enough, in my view, as an excuse for what you've done, or what you're doing. I'm only making a buck. Well, how? But the point is people are being put into positions where they have to do this, to do certain things. And moral judgments are getting more and more complicated. But if you don't have a sense of quietude and reflection, without killing yourself, life's short, or I pause for thought, principle ethics, am I doing the right thing here? Then you're not educated. And the text generation, the non-reading of books, the reading of popular media, the soundbite, the infomercials, the conditioning of more intelligence by Cambridge Analytica and all those people selling us things we don't want or profiling us. This site, I don't know, keeps sending me emails because I haven't delisted from the proper Quora Digest. And they seem to have come to a view about me. Well, what's that based on? But they're trying to work out in this new world order how to get you to be a consumer to them by appealing to you. And I don't like being profiled. And more to the point, all educated people have quidities, edges, and oddities. They're not in little boxes. And gradually we're parceling people into little boxes for the purpose of being consumers and so on. But I should also say that being educated is a precious commodity you should clutch onto. But we all have to make adjustments to get over to a world, a new dark age of sub-education, zombie democracy, of zombie land. And therefore you have to talk to the zombie in the zombie's language at some level. If you're interacting with some of Irish politicians or barristers or police officers, well, you have to realise how far ape shit goes. And you have to talk ape shit to apes. A bit like David Attenborough talking to the gorillas. Otherwise the gorillas won't understand you. Now, this is the problem. That once you're at that level of reductionism, you have to realise then, I think, that understanding when to employ education values, manners, and civility is something you have to do, but also something you have to do with judgment, finesse, and care for intruding on people's sensitivities. I'm not good at this. I'm much better now than I was at discipline and self-imposed discipline and restraining myself, but I'm inclined to just go for the jugular still. It's the parliamentary debater in me. And my hatred of stupidity, I think, has reached epic proportions. It's not so much stupidity. I'm stupid in some respects. I can't tie my shoelaces. I can't open a door properly. My shirt's hanging out all the time. But I'm not ignorant. And it's ignorance that I hate. And we are breeding a generation among our younger people of subliterate, ignorant people. And also, degrees are not education, but final point as well. The worst type of education of all is semi-education. And that's creeping in all the time. Sound bites, sounding convincing, I was on a radio program with this expert housing lobbyist guy. And he says, I'm all in favour of people who don't pay their mortgages being evicted. Right, okay. Where to was my question. And he couldn't answer. So people are clamouring for attention in a semi-educated way, in the psychobabble of our universe.